I will make all the lands of the world into one nation. The sun will not shine on any land that does not border us, for I will cover the sea with ships. The plains will be full of men. So large will be my armies that for 7 days and 7 nights my men will spend crossing the sea. This powerful quote of Xerxes as he was about to cross into Greece shows the sheer power of the Persians. The lands of the Middle East were never one of small states. It was a land of massive kingdoms. Throughout antiquity, 3 massive Persian empires ruled the stretch of land from the eastern Mediterranean to the borders of India. They were a constant threat to the peoples of the Mediterranean, from the Greeks to the Romans of the Republic, of the Empire, and even later during the Byzantine period. There was, to the east, this monster, this behemoth, putting Europe in check. And today, I've prepared a lovely selection of coins issued by these empires to show you. We're going to see how very different they are from the usual Greek and Roman coinage tradition we're used to. And I'm joined today by the PN Collection, a passionate collector of Persian coins who so kindly shared his collection with us today. Make sure to follow him on Instagram. I can't collect all there is out there, and the help of these kind collectors is what makes classical numismatics what it is. And while you're at it, remember to also leave a like in this video to help the channel grow. Okay, let's get started. The first of the Persian empires of antiquity was the Achaemenid Empire, and we can't talk about this kingdom without going over Cyrus the Great. The rise of the Achaemenids was one of the most astonishing territorial explosions of antiquity. What had been a relatively modest kingdom in what is modern southwestern Iran, founded around the 8th century BC, remained a fairly minor regional power until the rise of Cyrus in the mid-6th century BC. In the space of a few decades, they conquered the Median Empire around 550 BC, then the rich kingdom of Lydia around 547-548, and finally Babylon in 539 BC. Later, Achaemenid kings would expand the empire even further. They succeeded with a mix of military prowess and great strategy. They exploited the weaknesses of their bigger neighbors with remarkable speed and intelligence. Cyrus, for example, faced enemies that were many times bigger than him in terms of territory and troops, but he only struck when they were politically divided or right at the time they were facing some kind of internal or external crisis. The Persian people themselves, they also deserve a credit. They were this rugged, hard-fighting people from the Iranian highlands, people used to a very harsh life, a very harsh environment. And fighting was nothing new for them. And with those conquests came immense wealth. At their height, the Achaemenids had accumulated 5,000 tons of gold and silver. For you to have an idea, it took Alexander the Great, after his conquest of Persia, 25,000 mules, a literal army of pack animals, just to transport all of this wealth back to Macedon. The Achaemenids were introduced to coinage through their wars of expansion. When Cyrus the Great conquered Lydia around 547 BC, it was ruled by a man called Croesus. You might know him, a king remembered in antiquity for his legendary wealth. The Lydians are credited with the invention of coinage in around the late 7th century BC, and Croesus in particular, he introduced something even more remarkable: the world's first bimetallic coinage system, with separate coins of gold and silver. The Persians picked up on this new social technology that their new subjects had introduced and decided to keep making it. Cyrus didn't immediately replace the images on the coins with Persian designs. What he did instead was to continue issuing the cresids as they were. After all, why change something that was working so well, right? So what you see here is a little silver cresid issued in Lydia, but one that was made when it was already under Persian rule. Here we have this image of a bull and a lion facing each other in this very confrontational pose. This is a very common symbol you find in Middle Eastern art, and there are different theories to the original meaning of this. One I particularly like is that the lion represents the king, the royal powers. Let's remember, for the ancient Persians, the king was a deity on earth. He was all-powerful. So he had full rights of bending nature to his will. So here's where we have the lion. In nature, its vital forces were represented by the bull being attacked and killed by the lion for sustenance. A very nice metaphor representing sheer power. I take what I want because I can. Eventually, the Persians replaced the old lion and bull type with the coinage that would define the Achaemenid Empire until its fall. The gold daric and the silver siglos. Both had the same design. And as far as metrology, as far as weight standard goes, these coins are actually basically a continuation of what the Lydians had created. But the Persians gave it their own native design. So on these coins, the obverse now showed the Achaemenid king himself, armed with different weapons depending on the type, while the reverse kept the old incus punch inherited from the Lydians' initial tradition of coinage. One gold daric was worth 20 sigloi, and as we can see here in this siglos, we have the king holding a spear and a bow. The king is shown holding different kinds of weapons depending on the type of siglos that we're looking at. This one is dated between the years 490 and 375 BC, so right at the time when Persia was trying to invade Greece. Sigloi like these are incredibly common and affordable today. The Persians had plenty of time to strike many millions of them, and their empire was enormously rich, meaning this is one of the oldest coins you can actually get for a relatively affordable price. And of course, they are very historically relevant. Even if you are mostly like a Western collector, I mean, you prefer like Greek coinage or Roman coinage, especially if you collect Greek coins. Greek history is deeply connected to the Persians. Adding a few Persian coins to a Greek set gives it a lot more flavor, I would say. The end of the Achaemenid series comes shortly after the conquest of Alexander the Great. For a while, the old Persian territory still produced a few sigloi and darics, including a series of very impressive double gold darics under the Greek satraps of Babylon. Very impressive coins of like 17 grams of gold. This must have been a fortune in a single coin. But shortly after, Persian coinage was replaced by Hellenistic coins under the Seleucids, who took most of the old Achaemenid territory. For centuries, the Middle East produced Greek coins. I'm showing you now an example of a Seleucid tetradrachma of Seleucus II, made around the year 240 BC. And as we can see, the Macedonian tradition of coins was completely different to that of the Persians. They prioritized, for example, realism on their coins, so everyone could see exactly what the king looked like. Now, despite having a different numismatic tradition, the Seleucids knew how to do mass propaganda on coins. They understood, for example, that their Neo-Persian subjects were accustomed to being ruled by a different kind of king compared to the Hellenistic monarchs. It was a king really connected to the divine. Despite there being efforts to Hellenize the population under the rule, they constantly still passed this message that connected the Seleucid king either directly to some kind of direct godhood, making them look like a god, or of him being under tutelage, under the blessings of a specific god. So in the case of this coin, for example, Seleucus leans on Apollo as his patron. We can see him on the reverse here. Apollo is leaning on a tripod and he's examining a little arrow, both symbols connected to him. And we can read the legends, Basileus Seleuco, of King Seleucus. As you can see, like a very different type of visual language overall. Now, eventually, the Seleucids would fall, and they fell to the next protagonists in our video, the next native Persian Empire. Well, they actually fell for the Romans, but give me a little bit of poetic flexibility here. And that would be the Parthians. Parthia began as one of the eastern territories of the Seleucid Empire. They were basically vassals of the Seleucids. But around the mid-3rd century BC, they broke away and gradually took control of most of Seleucid territories. They managed this very quick expansion through a combination of their military prowess. The Parthians came from this nomadic background and they were incredible horse archers, a style of warfare perfectly suited to the open landscapes of Iran. And at the same time, the Seleucids were repeatedly, like over and over, weakened by civil wars, and they just couldn't unify their forces to face this threat. Meaning the Parthians just came in, took large swaths of territories, and then the Parthians, now rulers of a massive empire and lots of cities, they started adopting part of the lifestyle of their conquered lands, which included the issue and the use of coins. Now, Parthian coinage, it's super interesting. It looks very Greek in style. For example, what you see here in the obverse of this tetradrachma of Mithridates II, an earlier Parthian king, this kind of struck between 121 and 91 BC, around that time. So what we can see here is clearly like a Persian king. It's different from the Greek monarchs. We can see that this is not really someone ethnically Greek, and he didn't show himself as a Greek. For example, the beard, long beards were very characteristic features of Persian rulers. They always had, they're shown with amazing beards, but facial hair aside, the rest of the style on the coin, the way of engraving the images, is basically a total adoption of Greek coinage tradition. The denominations are Greek. They use the Attic standard, first established by Alexander, to determine the weight of the coins, and I wouldn't be surprised if they employed Greek die engravers at the mint, because the style is basically the same. Mithridates here even wears a diadem like a Macedonian monarch. And on the reverse, yet more Greek heritage. Parthian coins had inscriptions in Greek. Here we have this fascinating mix of cultures. There's some Parthian identity seeping in. If we look at Seleucid silver coinage, for example, lots of them featured Apollo, once again, sitting on the omphalos, the mythological navel of the world. And here, the navel, this throne-like object, is still in place, but Apollo gives way to a Parthian warrior. Maybe this might even be the king himself, examining his bow. We can also see another Persian innovation in this figure here. Pants. Yeah, right. Pants were invented by steppe nomads in order to protect their legs from riding a horse for so many hours every day. As for the legends here, it reads, Basileus Megalo Arsaco Epiphanos, of the great king Arsaces the Glorious. The Parthians didn't name their kings on coins. Instead, they gave themselves this interesting title, Arsaces. This was a homage to the first Parthian king, whose name was Arsaces. So it's like if the name of the first king became synonymous with the word king, just like all Roman emperors after Augustus gave themselves the title Augustus to symbolize they were emperors. Now, how about another Parthian coin? This other tetradrachma we have here is a little bit later, issued under Phraates IV between 38 and 2 BC, so right at the turn between AD and BC. And here we can actually see the Hellenistic style on the portraits slowly becoming more abstract as they departed from the Hellenistic culture that permeated the once Seleucid territories, and its art, actually, the Parthian art starts becoming more properly Parthian rather than an adaptation of Greek coins. And because by this time, anti-Western sentiment in Parthia was slowly starting to build up as the years passed, and the local elites generally pushed for a separation from the Greeks and the Romans in everything, including art. So here, for example, we can see that if you look at the portrait overall, for example, the royal diadem, it has changed. It isn't the Greek fabric strip anymore. It looks like more like some kind of tiara. It has like multiple lines, multiple layers. And the portrait itself has lost some of the three-dimensionality of the previous coins, despite still being a pretty good-looking portrait. As for the reverse, however, we still see some important connections to Greek culture. This is actually intriguing. We even have some positive nods to the Greeks on the part of the king, much probably to the disdain of the local pro-Persian elites. The choice in design here is really interesting. It really pushes to a more Hellenized message. I mean, especially the design on the reverse, like the center. Now we have the Parthian king sitting on his throne, and he's being crowned by Athena, a Greek goddess. This must have been particularly good to see for like the large Greek populations still living inside Parthian territory, but maybe this could have been like a nod to just like the overall Mediterranean world. I mean, Parthia was now a big player, so they had to adapt to this geopolitical reality. For example, at this time, Greek was the lingua franca in diplomacy and commerce. And this coin actually, it comes from right around the time Latin was starting to become the dominant language, but Greek always played a very important role, especially on coins. The legends in this reverse are quite a mouthful, so let's break this down. It reads, Basileus Basileon, of the King of Kings, Arsako Euergeto, Arsaki is the benefactor, Dikaios Epiphanos Philelenos, the just, glorious, friend of the Greeks. Friend of the Greeks, huh? Phraates here was not a huge fan of the Romans. He actually became famous for defeating Mark Antony and forcing the Romans to retreat. But as we can see here, he still pursued some kind of approach to the Hellenistic sphere, which was on its downfall by that time. The Parthians finally fell in the 3rd century AD. Over the span of the 1st and 2nd centuries, they began to weaken due to continuous civil wars. And of course, Rome to the west was at the very height of its power. There was a bit of a Cold War in the 1st century, but then Trajan came in the 2nd century and completely crushed them. For a time, he even annexed Mesopotamia, the Parthian heartland, but Hadrian, his successor, decided to withdraw. And in the end, the final blow actually came from within, from Persis. This was a vassal kingdom located in modern southwestern Iran. Yes, from the same land where the original Achaemenids came from. They took advantage of the chaos, and their first king, Ardashir, toppled the Parthians very quick. Between 224 and 226, it took him just 2-3 years, and he founded the Sasanian Empire, the 3rd great Persian Empire. I am personally fascinated by the Sasanians. They developed a state that was much more complex. They had a much stronger imperial administration compared to the Parthians. From the quality of their art in particular, we can see they were incredibly refined. And I think it's a shame we don't talk a lot about them, because it seems like their technology was nearly as complex, as refined as what the Romans could produce. They too produced monumental architecture, they had very elegant royal imagery, maybe not realistic in style as the Greco-Roman tradition, but equally intricate, delicate, high quality. Their state religion of Zoroastrianism is also very interesting. They had this precept of improving the world, of creating fertility and beauty where once there was just barren land. They have this fascinating mythology. For example, the Sasanians, they venerated elements such as fire, water, the concept of fertility of the land, and one of the ways they practiced this worship was by creating large irrigation channels and these lush gardens in places that were previously barren deserts. The Old Persian word for walled garden, these gardens, pairi daisa, this word gave rise to our word paradise. That's how famous their gardens were. This was considered a way of, according to their religion, of properly wielding these elemental powers of nature and directing them towards their idea of good. It's really interesting. And they gave rise to yet another wonderful numismatic tradition as well. That's a good opportunity for me to show you the first Sasanian coin, a silver drachma of Ardashir, the founder of this empire. Pretty interesting change in the appearance of the coins, right? As far as weight and silver content goes, it didn't change from the Parthian standard. Their unit of account was still a drachma of fine silver, around 4 modern grams, but as you can see, the manufacture was quite different. They opted to make these flat, very wide discs, and the image of the coins are in low relief. This must have been easier maybe to manufacture compared to the compact flans of the Parthians, because in this case here you could just cut these from a sheet of hammered silver, while the compact flans had to be cast individually, and they had to, of course, to be heated up and cast, which probably was a much more expensive process. So what do we have here? On the obverse there is a bust of Ardashir. Quite a few changes in iconography here. Despite the coin being low relief, the portrait, it looks spectacular. Sasanian coins are quite individualized. We can actually make out which king is which. You could of course read the legends, which now are in Middle Persian rather than Greek, so it's a little bit more complicated, but you can also identify the kings for the combination of their beard and the hair, the crown, which is unique to the king. So it's this combination of the hair and the crown they wear. Each king had its own. If we focus at this part, for example, we can see the crown, and then there's this bow-like object on the top of their heads, right? This is a corimbos. So they would grab the king's hair on the top of his head, and they would make a knot, like a ball with a knot on the top of his head. And they would then wrap it around like some kind of cloth, creating this ball-like shape, which was considered like a part of the crown. It was meant to represent the sun, the divine powers of the king. And as we go to the legends, we have a proclamation of Ardashir's right to rule, as a good king should. It translates to the worshipper of Mazda, Lord Ardashir. Ahura Mazda was the most important deity of Zoroastrianism. It then continues, Ardashir, king of kings of Iran, whose origin is from the gods. Heading to the reverse, we have another major symbol of Zoroastrian religion, the fire altar. These were sacred fires housed in special temples. These fires were kept alight by priests. The fire was never meant to be put out, and represented the flame that kept the world functioning, that gave the world its dynamism. We can see this very complicated looking altar here with these multiple different legs, these decorations, and at the top there's some kind of recipient, and of course the fire burning. There are also some short legends at the top section, which in this case translate to the fire of Ardashir. The Sasanians also had a more complicated monetary system too. They issued gold coins. Here we have this wonderful dinar, 7.5 grams of gold, quite a substantial coin, definitely heavier than the weight of a Roman gold coin at the time. And here in this coin we have the bane of Rome, the second Sasanian king, Shapur. Another thing that the Sasanians were very good at was kicking Rome's ass. They were incredible warriors. They were a real problem for the Romans. They managed to defeat Roman armies many times. In more than one occasion, the Romans saw like the real possibility of losing their eastern regions to the Persians. And we can't forget, of course, about one of their most impressive feats, the capture of a Roman emperor in battle. Emperor Valerian, Shapur captured him. They employed this combination of horse archers, introduced by the Parthians, with the use of heavy shock cavalry, the cataphracts, to great effect against the Roman legions. Now, looking at the portrait here, we can't really distinguish Shapur from Ardashir simply for his facial features, but we can certainly discern like from everything else basically. He has a completely different portrait. His beard is, now it's tightly tied to like a circular bundle next to his chin. The hair is also different. It has like a curlier appearance, and it's more like towards the back of his head rather than falling on his shoulders. And the crown is also, wow, this one is really impressive. It's really over the top. It's much more elaborate. We have these flaps falling down to the side of his head, covering his ears. The crown is also much more complex. There are these like turret-like protrusions pointing upwards. We can see like 3 of them here. And of course the corimbos on the top, the ball, this is also more elaborate. There are some circular decorations like little pellets on it. It's a much more complex design. It would be easy to distinguish one king from the other by looking at the portraits. As for the legends, it translates to, once again, the worshipper of Mazda, Shapur, King of Kings of Iran and non-Iran, whose origin is from the gods. A little bit of a mouthful. But hey, check out, like, Kings of Iran and non-Iran. He's a little bit like dissing on the Romans. He's claiming lordship of the Iranian peoples and of those from other origins. Shapur certainly had some imperial ambitions that went above simply keeping the Romans at bay. On the reverse, we have a significant change in imagery as well. The fire altar is simpler, now it's just like this tall column, and it's being protected by 2 attendants. Maybe these are like 2 guards taking care of the sacred fire. This will be the standard reverse for Sasanian coins. You will see this seen in all coins of the following monarchs. In this case, like, beautiful body depiction of the attendants here. We can actually see they wear some elaborate clothes as well. You can see like the different folds. We can appreciate the clothing was very loose. It's overall a very well accomplished design overall. The legends for this reverse don't change much from the previous coin. It reads, "The Fire of Shapur." But even the mighty Sasanians would also find their end. In their case, once more, after being weakened by dynastic struggles, they were easy prey for the first Islamic wars of expansion in the 7th century. But their legacy lingered on. Many of their technological advancements were adopted and preserved by the first Islamic caliphates, and numismatically, the Sasanian drachma, the silver coin, it lingered on, becoming the first Islamic coins, first as basically copies, and later adapted as the silver dirham, which would be struck by dozens of Islamic states for centuries. And here it is, the tale of these amazing Persian empires. I really urge you to have a look at their coinage because it's such an underappreciated and wonderful numismatic world to collect. And if you collect something like Roman or Greek coins, the next natural step would be to collect coins of those who fought against them. So yeah, give the coins of the ancient Persians a try. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Happy collecting, and I'll see you soon! Let me give a special thank you to all of my amazing channel members and Patreons for their generous support. This channel would not be the same without your help. And if you would like to be part of this list, have early access to my videos when they are uploaded to YouTube, and a series of other perks, make sure to check out my Patreon page and my members tab on YouTube. Thank you very much.